The stench of a dead king. They found him sprawled across the sheets, bloated, oozing, unmoving. The King of England, stewing in his own decay. His body was splitting open from the inside. Fluids poured through the wooden coffin. The stench, they said it made the servants gag. His chamber reeked not of death, but of punishment. This is not the tale of a royal farewell. This is the rotting death of Henry VIII. The Prince of Promise. Before the stench, before the sores, there was a boy, a prince. Born into destiny in 1491, Henry Tudor was the golden child of England's future, athletic, charming, fluent in Latin, theology, music, diplomacy, and war. He wasn't meant to rule. That was his brother Arthur's burden. But Arthur's death changed everything. Henry, at just 17, became the king the world hadn't prepared for. And oh, how the world would pay for that mistake. The early years of Henry's reign were dazzling. He was a warrior king, fighting France, reforming the navy, and writing treatises against Martin Luther. The Pope called him defender of the faith. His people called him magnificent. He married his dead brother's widow, Catherine of Aragon. A bold choice, a dangerous one, but it was only the beginning of a legacy stained in betrayal. Because under that handsome smile, behind the chivalry and charm, there was a seed, a darkness, waiting. Wives, betrayal, and blood. The king who once dazzled Europe became obsessed, not with conquest, not with glory, but with legacy. Catherine of Aragon gave him only one living child, a daughter. That wasn't enough. England needed a prince, and Henry needed an heir. Desperation began to rot him from within. So he cast her aside and reached for someone younger, Anne Boleyn. Anne promised him a future, but when she too failed to give him a son, she gave him something else, a reason. On trumped-up charges of adultery and incest, Anne was executed at the Tower of London. Her head fell to the block, cold, silent, and still. It was the second queen Henry had loved, and the first he had murdered. Jane Seymour bore him a son, but died just days later. His only true heir came at the price of her blood. 6 queens, 2 beheaded, 3 discarded. Only one survived. Behind palace walls, fear grew louder than prayer. Henry had become unpredictable, paranoid, brutal. His court was soaked in betrayal and silence. No one was safe, not wives, not friends, not even blood relatives. The man who once embodied Renaissance promise was becoming a living omen. But while his court bled, his body was beginning to rot. The monster emerges. By the 1540s, Henry VIII was no longer a man. He was a mass, a collapsing empire of flesh. The jousting accident that once bruised his leg never healed. It festered, it opened, and it oozed. The leg ulcer swelled with pus and dead tissue, filling the royal chambers with the rancid stench of decaying meat. Surgeons cut it open daily, draining it with hot irons and poultices made of dung, honey, and vinegar. He screamed through his teeth as they jabbed into his rot, but worse than the pain was the smell. It gagged his own doctors. And as his body expanded, his temper shrank. He ballooned to over 400 pounds, so large he could no longer walk, stand, or clean himself. They built him a chair with pulleys to haul him from bed to toilet, but even that couldn't carry his dignity. He was covered in sores, cystic swellings, hair loss. His breath was sour with infection, and beneath it all, a raging, untreated case of type 2 diabetes, if not syphilis, twisted his brain like a vine. He saw plots everywhere, shadows, whispers, hallucinations of betrayal. He was no longer a king. He was a grotesque tyrant, decomposing while alive, a swollen sack of power, fear, and sickness, a beast on a throne. But worse was yet to come. The final days. It was winter, January 1547. Whitehall Palace had grown quiet. The king hadn't walked in months. His screams had become wheezes, his commands gibberish. Henry VIII lay trapped in his own body. His legs had ballooned with fluid. His skin cracked and wept. Beneath the bandages, raw, blackening flesh, rotting faster than they could clean it. Every time they moved him, he howled. The ulcers on his thigh had burrowed deep, all the way to the bone. He could smell himself. No one dared speak of death, not even the priests. To tell a king he was dying was treason, but everyone knew. They could see it, in the leaking dressings, in the dark pools beneath his bedding, in the blackened fingertips. The once great Henry, who had stood tall over Europe, now lay whimpering in fever, his stomach distended, his breath foul, his skin waxy and discolored. He soiled himself constantly. They tried to mask the odor with herbs and perfume, but the smell won. And then it stopped. Henry VIII, once England's lion, died on January 28, 1547. In his chamber there was no majesty, only the silence of a bloated corpse, surrounded by servants too afraid to speak. But his horror wasn't over. Death and the rot. He was dead, but his body hadn't finished its performance. Protocol dictated his body be embalmed and placed in a coffin within hours, but Henry VIII was not cooperating. His corpse was massive, distended, leaking. His stomach, packed with gases, began to swell. Putrefaction had started almost immediately. For days, the coffin remained inside Whitehall. It was too heavy to move, too unstable. The king's body was soaking through the materials. The temperature rose, the gases expanded, and sometime during the night, his abdomen ruptured. Black, foul-smelling liquid, a mixture of blood, bile, and liquefied organs, began to leak from the coffin seams. It soaked the wood. It pooled onto the floor. One account claims a dog entered the chamber and lapped at the puddle. They called it blasphemy, divine punishment, the devil mocking a king. Others whispered that the rupture was a curse, a final sign from the God he had defied, the God whose church he had split, the wives he had slaughtered. His embalmed corpse continued to rot. Even in the lead-lined coffin, the stench bled through. By the time they moved the coffin to Windsor, the odor was inescapable. People avoided the route. No one lined the roads. There were no cries of mourning. England did not lose a father. England discarded a monster. Henry VIII, the king who reshaped England with blood and fire, ended as little more than a cautionary tale, rotting through the floor of his own kingdom. Legacy and the curse. He was buried beneath the floor at Windsor Castle. No grand mausoleum, no golden statue, just stone and silence. But even in death he couldn't rest. His tomb was disturbed, his remains unrecognizable. What was found was bloated, broken, incomplete. His body, much like his rule, had collapsed in on itself. And what of his children, the legacy he murdered wives for? Edward, his precious son, ruled for just 6 years. He died at 15. Mary, daughter of the Queen he cast aside, became Bloody Mary, burning hundreds alive before dying childless. Elizabeth, daughter of the beheaded Anne Boleyn, ruled long, but never married. She died alone. The Tudor bloodline ended with her. No heirs, no dynasty, just ghosts and questions. Some say it was a curse, others divine judgment, but those closest to him knew the truth. Henry VIII ruled with a sword, but died like a beast. His kingdom endured, but the man rotted into legend. If you thought Henry VIII's death was horrific, you haven't met his daughter Mary. Subscribe to Twisted Facts Vault. History isn't clean, it bleeds.